Today for Faith Around and Find Out, we're going to be talking about Jesus' bedroll.
Let's do this!
Yeah, this is going to be loads of fun because, biblically speaking, idolatry is a bad thing. Just ask Abraham and the golden calf. You saw it right, it's the Shroud of Turin. Special thanks to Discord Shroud advocate Catholic traditionalist for trolling a room I was chatting in to make me want to take him down a notch. Audio Demon, you want to greet CT in your own special way?
Fuck you, you old bitch!
Perfect. But of course, he doesn't have his own videos on this, so I had to go and find somebody else, and I came across a guy named Glenn Beck. And he has a couple of videos on the topic, so let's be nice to Glenn, ACD.
Yeah, no. Oh, no. Oh, no.
Wouldn't have you any other way. For those that don't know, the Shroud of Turin is a cloth allegedly to be a burial cloth from the tomb of Jesus Christ. The shroud originally appeared in France back in the mid-1300s, and by the end of the 14th century, it was deemed a forgery, and Bishop Henry de Poitiers had identified the artist that made it. Regardless, it was passed on over the years and ended up in the Turin Cathedral in the late 16th century. The shroud appears to be a burial cloth with the image of a person imprinted onto the fibers with their hands resting folded on their lap in a laying position, much like someone would be laid to rest after death. The head is in the middle of the cloth, mirrored to the opposite side with an image on the back of the character. There are marks stained on the shroud at the head and the hands, as well as these markings, according to believers, are blood marks from the thorns and nails from where Jesus was put on the cross. That about sum it up in a short description?
I'm sorry. We don't give a fuck.
Now that was disrespectful.
No, I don't think so.
The audio clip demon does not have a filter, but that's why we love him here. Before we get started, this is going to have shades of idolatry, and since we're talking about Catholicism for this round, I wanted to set one record straight. Catholics do not worship Mary. They venerate, meaning they honor her. Asking Mary to pray for you is no different than asking your cousin or aunt, mother or father, friend or enemy. Take the Hail Mary, known to most Catholics, which ends saying, "Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners." It is not worship. It is a request for prayer. Idolatry, instead, is to worship through an object or to worship the object. So why is it called a prayer? Well, from a Catholic viewpoint, prayer and worship are very different things. You can worship through prayer, but you don't pray through worship. And you can worship without prayer through your actions, and likewise pray without worship by asking for help. So to the Christians that want to try and pull that card on the Catholics, now, on to Glenn Beck.
The carbon dating shows that it's not from the time of Christ. It's like 800 or 1,000 years later. And they can tell you that it's definitely not the Shroud of Christ, but they cannot explain the image on the shroud. It is almost a photographic negative of a body that has all of the wounds that Christ would have had.
Okay, we're going straight into it then. I was expecting to pull this up later, but okay. So this is incorrect and shows the dishonesty of shroud worshippers. The shroud was recreated using 14th century techniques about right when it was discovered by a guy named Luigi Garicelli, a scientist at the University of Pavia. He used a bas-relief as a type of sculpture and ochre paint to apply the image to a cloth and applies the paint with a stamp. He then bakes the thing in an oven, which simulates aging and singes the image onto the cloth in a way. The ink itself ashes away, leaving the cloth alone. A bit of washing, and it gives plenty of wear. no brush marks, no trace of pigment, and leaves the same image on the cloth he tried with. Now, he isn't an artist, so his quality isn't going to be exactly perfect.
And here's the sugar on the cream.
Something to think about here with the image itself. The typical thing Catholics that worship the shroud will say is that it shows Jesus was lifted up with a radiant light. But there's a problem with that. The shroud only images in two directions, and light shines in all directions from a light source. So for there to be an image, the entire thing would only be a shadow, and there would be a sort of wrap-around appearance to the image, not a distinct front and back like we see in it. But wait, there's even more. Back in the 14th century, the shroud was denounced as a forgery by the Bishop of Troyes, Henry de Poitiers, having identified the artist himself. Back in 1978, microscopist Walter Macron found the image was created with red ochre paint, the blood being painted on with vermilion paint, both in a gelatin medium. And hey, isn't that similar how to Ouija created it? Now, a video was presented to me about this exact thing. The scientist in 1978 did find the pigment, and they stated that it was evenly distributed through the shroud, with no more on the marks than off the marks. Keeping in mind, the marks were made with the paint suspended in gelatin, and then baked, which would have evaporated the gelatin and dried out the pigment entirely. The entire point of the bake, then washed several times to get as much off of it as possible. In the manner of washing, the residue of the pigment would have been evenly distributed through the water because the method used does not actually dye the cloth, and instead stains it. And in 700 years of handling, it would be expected to see the residue to be evenly distributed. This is a cloth, not a rock. Even so much as walking past the thing every day or driving past the cathedral would do it. And this has been handled less than stellarly over the centuries, only until recently. So that claim about the shroud is debunked.
Stay tuned.
Oh man, we're only just getting started. So I wanted to leave the 1978 fact for the end because in Glenn's video, the guest named Barrie Schwortz says this.
I was invited onto the team to participate in the examination of the shroud. We spent 5 days and nights nonstop working around the clock back in 1978 and performed the first and only in-depth scientific study of that cloth that's ever been done in its history.
I suppose he should have talked to his other team members to see what they found. But then again, Barrie wasn't one of the scientists actually doing the research. He was a photographer, and at the time he ran Barrie Schwortz Studios for photography. So back at that time, the only time, according to him, that a thorough analysis was done of the holy toilet paper, it was found to be a fake.
Well, that's not fair at all.
This was when the Catholic Church denounced it again. So far, Glenn is 0 for 2.
Sorry if that's weird.
Audio Demon.
So, how can I help you?
Next clip, please.
Okay, so they did the tests, and they said it's the carbon dating is wrong.
The carbon dating didn't happen until 10 years after we examined the shroud. Our team examined it, and our primary purpose was really to determine how that image was formed. And ultimately, the science eliminated all those possibilities. We can tell you what it's not, but we don't know of a mechanism that can create an image on a piece of cloth with the same chemical, physical properties that we documented on the shroud.
But wait a second. That team found evidence of the paint and gel used to make it. Why would Barrie straight up lie like this? The only reason that Barrie might do so is to lie just to give credit to the shroud. And this is what you'll find a lot in the sycophants over these idols. They will give just about any reason to justify the worship of an object for their greater faith. And in this case, you have people that would have had to get the information and still dismiss the evidence that was picked up and documented. So now that we can know Barrie has no problem convincing himself if the shroud is real and then tell everyone that will listen we should dismiss his claims about the shroud from here on out. But Glenn mentioned the carbon dating of the shroud. So it's actually been dated several times. In 1986 and 87, a sample was taken and then examined by 3 labs. Oxford, Tucson, and Zurich were given small samples to be tested, and they were not to communicate with each other initially. In 1988, the tests were done, and a final date range was between 1260 and 1390 CE, placing it right in the date range of when it appeared in history in the first place. So, shroud debunked?
Stay tuned.
ACD is right. There are more tests because the shroud's worshippers started crying out that the shroud was contaminated and came up with dozens upon dozens of reasons for it. There were more carbon dates that ranged from 5th century to the 14th century, with the majority saying the 14th. Until recently, an X-ray scanning analysis of the shroud was done, since nothing else to them would show legitimacy, and it got them the date they wanted, close to 1st century.
Wait, what?
In fact, it was the only one that did, so immediately all the worshippers shouted,
This is amazing!
Interesting, isn't it?
Yes!
So let's explore why it dated to the 1st century CE. This was the most challenging part of the research for this video, just trying to find something that isn't just another Catholic or Christian website talking about what they want of the evidence and not looking at it critically.
That would be more effective.
But I did finally find the documented papers detailing an unbiased method, full analysis of what was revealed.
What took you so long?
So they did a wide-angle X-ray scattering analysis of the cloth, and study said 1st century CE, putting it at the time of Christ. So, is that it?
No, I don't think so.
Correct, ACD. So the X-ray scan that they use detects the degradation of cellulose, the natural aging process that degrades it over the course of thousands of years, can be accelerated within a few short days by doing what? Cooking it in an oven. And remember back when I said Luigi Garashelli made his own version of the shroud?
Yes!
Remember how he did the image?
Yeah.
In an oven.
Of course, sir.
So the oven that created the shroud back in the 14th century is the exact same oven that made the thing look older than it actually is.
You get a tweet now.
Oh, but I'm not even done yet. In the final conclusion of the test and the final results, it was deemed unlikely and only possible under extremely specific circumstances that the age be 2,000 years old if kept in specific temperatures and specific humidity, as if it was in protection for the 14 centuries, similar to the way it is currently held in Turin. But that's highly unlikely, all things considered, and in the manner in which it appeared in history, supposedly over 1,300 years after the resurrection.
Holy shit!
The resurrection story that actually speaks about the cloth being left behind, and actually says in John chapter 20 verse 6 and in Luke chapter 24 verse 12 that the linen wrapping Jesus was in strips, not a whole cloth, and John chapter 20 verse 7 that says his head was wrapped in a separate cloth laying away from the strips of linen. So even biblically, the Shroud of Turin is a fake, since it does not match the description in the Bible. And in case you're wondering, nowhere in the other 2 Gospels is the linen mentioned. So to all shroud worshippers,
Fuck you.
stop praying and giving glory to your holy handkerchief and put that thing in an art museum where it should be viewed as the counterfeit bullshit it is that fooled a huge number of the members of the Catholic Church for centuries, when several people in the church confirmed it was a fake from the start.
Nailed it like the fucking Romans!
Oh, that was a wonderful response, taking into account the subject for today.
Sarcasm is unbecoming of you.
You're the smartass of this team.
Bet you're wrong.
Now, you wait here a sec.
Take a joke, asshole.
Demon, what do you want from me?
Be a sport and grab Daddy another beer, would you?
I think I liked you better when you were quoting Has-Been.
Okay, fine.
I think we can close it out here. Any last words for our subject for this week?
No.
How about Catholic traditionalist?
Yes.
Really? Well, we're waiting. Say what you gotta say to him.
Thanks for another forgettable experience.
Sounds good. I am Corsi, and this is the Fluffy Atheist. Hit those like and subscribe buttons, and share me if you want to share a funny video or you want to point and laugh. I'm good either way.